everyone, welcome back to PommyInOz. Hope we're all doing really well today. If you are new around here, please smash a like, please smash that subscribe button. And if you do want to become a member of the channel, you can do. Link is in the description, or it should be where the subscribe button is. If you have subscribed, say and join. We do wonderful things here. We sponsor a few players. We've got Domaku, we've got the sponsorship event tomorrow. So if you are around, come and say hello to me. We also sponsor the wonderful Shannon Gore, good friend of mine, good friend of the channel, and Blue Abroad. You'll see her on AFL. She plays for the Preston Bullants, and she's the captain there and a phenomenal person. It's great to help the community out, and we're a good little community ourselves. And if you are returning PommyInOzer, you're right, how are you doing? Hey, 15-pointer against Sydney, and life is good, isn't it? 8-2. I hate to say it, but I can't see us losing a game this year. Bit of a dad joke there for you, but it was a real good, complete performance from the boys, and in my opinion, probably the best game of the year. This is a side that many pundits have had as a side that could potentially usurp Melbourne, and I thought the boys really applied themselves well. And what was really important in this game for me was the game plan. The game plan was structured around what Sydney do well. You know that Sydney are a tough outfit. They're a very heavy kick-based side. They look to take the game on very direct. It's a death by 1,000 kicks. And the way that Carlton set up was really trying to stop that, particularly in that dominant quarter as well. You saw Carlton really apply that game plan well, really put the pressure on the ball carrier and force them to kick along. And it was interesting in the third quarter when they did kind of get on top of Carlton, you did actually see that they had more kicks over 30 metres than Carlton, a long way, and they were successful. And that is kind of one of that's part of the course. Sometimes when you make them bold decisions, obviously the opposition is going to do it. But let's talk about Carlton's second quarter. A pressure rating of in the high 200s, one of the highest recorded this year. What that basically means is that is a constitute of literally all the pressure acts, your pressure indicators. They have a score judgment for how close they are, if you're a medium range, if you're a short range, and also what happens to the opposition's kicking efficiency and also their disposal efficiency. It's a very complicated metric. I don't want to bore you in it. But basically, it just says that Carlton have upped the ante a bit. And what you saw there, when we took away their short kicking options, it was long. And Carlton set themselves up behind the ball incredibly well. We talked in the preview about the young Whittaker in combination and how that will negate someone like Buddy Franklin. 2 goals from Buddy. One really was just, you can't really argue with it. If you get caught on the break, he booms it from 60. There's nothing Whittaker could do about that. However, aside from that, it was literally an absolute masterclass from the defensive structure. And it's okay giving Whittaker in the kudos. He has to bear the brunt of that. But that is a defensive effort as well. And that is how that structure works of what we talked about. That you've got young Whittaker in, creating that indecision of where he runs to in the leading zones, and also making it really hard for him to be free and be one out. And it was an absolute masterclass. So for me, that was a really enjoyable thing. I thought Carlton's game plan as well of how we play front and centre, and we'll cover that a bit later. But that's really important when you see Walsh go down the back, Cherra go down the back, Durden. That's all from that front and centre. And what we're starting to see is a team defence. Melbourne have gone 50-plus games without conceding 100, and that's partly because they've built, Goodwin and Roos built this team defence, this team ethos. And what that basically means, and I want you to think about it, is your half forward and your midfield line, and your half back and your half forward and your midfield line in both phases. So your half backs and your midfields in your attacking phase, and your half forwards and your midfield in your defensive phase actively work out. And they have got to be elite runners, and they've got to really put themselves front and centre of the ball. So if you use that in your mind's eye, kind of makes sense. I will talk about it a bit more in length in the fans column, but that is brilliant. Big shout out as well to the quackinghcauldron.com.au, who are sponsoring this segment. Wonderful place if you want all your new age, your crystals and your things into that, or you're just looking for a bit of spirituality help. They've got everything there. They accept all major things. So let's get into your questions, because I can't wait for this one. It's a ripper this week. So this one was asked by quite a few of you. We've got E.H. Jekyll. Gameplay changes between halves. Is it the second half instructional? Most games they've led by half-time. Second half always plays out like a different team. Good question. Saras Boy, good day to you, mate. For the first time in 3 weeks, we had another third out for lack of a better word. Did things change? Or was it the case of Sydney being a good side? Timmy W, good day to you, mate. One thing I've noticed in our periods is when we score heavily, we can quite easily be sliced open on counter-attack. Do we need some moderating in our defensive setup, even if it means we score less frequently? Good question. And Bill Ficky, good day, mate. How you doing? Why do you think we have big leads and give them up? Having multiple games now, is it mental, game plan, fitness? What do we do different in the second half? Well, this is a good question. Well, firstly, you've got to give kudos to the opposition, right? And I want to say that quite a lot of these third quarter ones have been, and I want you to think of this, right? Carlton genuinely have a higher pressure rating and a pressure rating index in the second quarter, which I do think that's something that Vossi has indicated. And it has been against teams that Sydney are a great example, that if you get the jump on them, their game plan makes it almost a lot harder for them to attack. When you're a kick-heavy game style, it's very hard to build scores quickly that way because your game plan is a risk. And we're going to see some things about David Teague's Carlton a bit later on in the show, which kind of makes sense to you guys and girls there. An analogy I want you to think of is if you're a boxer and in the 12th round you're behind on points and you're absolutely battered, it's quite easy to swing for the fences. And go back to Carlton 2020, 2021, when we were chasing the game, it's very easy when you're playing for pride almost, where the game is lost. So that's one thing. Another thing I want you to look at is there is no team in the AFL throughout the season that plays 4 full quarters unless it's against piss opposition and they're not on. And you've got to look at Hawthorn. They're not a Mickey Mouse side. People thought they were when we played them. They weren't. They've really built a very good structure. They proved it this week as well. It's tough. It's tough. And it's basically a case of it's not fitness-based because Carlton's running numbers are very good throughout. And I would say Carlton are probably one of the fittest sides. But it's just a case of the opposition chasing. And what you find, though, is if you actually look at the numbers, you actually break the game down, Carlton are really in control a lot of the way. Particularly this third quarter, Carlton were in control. They always had the lead, and that is what good sides do. And yes, you could make an argument that you could put them away, but effectively you are winning games. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And I want to talk about that high pressure isn't sustainable. And I mean that in an intelligent way. I don't mean that in a sustainability way of, oh my God, let's panic, Carlton and Mickey Mouse. It's not sustainable in the terms of it's impossible if you've identified it. And a lot of successful teams have it. I hate this third quarter premiership quarter nonsense. 95, throw it in the bin. It has no relevance in today's game. Anything that has been achieved in football pre-2015 is irrelevant in football now because the game moves on in massive leaps and bounds. And you can kind of see whatever teams are doing now, when they win the flag in 2 years' time, that's the new way of playing football. And that is how it is. It's the biggest copycat league in world sport. So what I mean by that is that every team identifies a quarter. Richmond's was the 4th. Do you know what I mean? Hawthorn's was incidentally the first 2. They like to get a good start and then control the football. So that is where sides are. And what Carlton are doing here is obviously have identified that this side needs a jump. And the reason is it makes the opposition dispel. And you saw, it's incidental. If you actually watch the Hawthorn game people bring up, you watch this game that's just gone. They totally had run out of legs, Sydney, in the 4th. And it's clever because Hawthorn like to play a kick style. That is their DNA. Sydney do. You ain't going to win games. But there is something that is structural that is important. So what we're going to look at here is the lines. Now, this works for defence and forward 50 as well. But that yellow there is where the ball is going. Now, what you find here is imagine the ball is going to land between these back 2 lines far left of your screen. That's going to be, say, your full back line and your half forward line, or your full forward line and your half forward line, right? It's the amount of, it's in between them lines the ball is going to be landing. And what Carlton do here is they look for their their midfield to run towards there and be in front of the ball massively. What that does is it creates pressure, and then you find that your half back line and your full back line, particularly in attack, they're all around that far line there. They've really encamped in. And it's what I talk about, that two-line defence. There is two walls, effectively. 3 walls from where the fall of the ball is, but 2 lines just on the outside of your 50. Now, when this gap starts to get going, so where them arrows are, when that gap doesn't move, there is now space to go in behind, exit D50 or enter inside 50. And that is where Carlton fall off, because it is kind of a fallout from pressure. You find that particularly Durden is guilty of this, and Owens in the small forward line, that half forward line when they encamp, that what happens is they're slightly to a front of the ball, right? And Carlton there then create this space. And what Carlton's line system does is it's kind of like, I would say, a line zonal system. What it kind of does is it's got to be perfectly centred. If there is a gap, there is a gap to play in, which then means you can intersect their lines. Carlton's lines are around 9 metres apart on average. And what that means in real terms is you're always kicking in the zones that you can mark to a player. So you can't just kick your way out of it. You're going to have to go long. And the biggest gap is usually around a 15, 20 metre, is the final line where the arrow starts and the line that's in the square. What that is saying there is we're asking you to kick. And Carlton get a lot of in, out, they're called rebound inside 50s from this technology. But also on the other way, that Carlton sometimes can fall into their own trap and the lines again become too spread. And instead of being in line with the square, at the edge of the square in D50, so about 65 metres out, they're about 70, causing that long kick, which again puts pressure on. But this is a real high running system for your half-backs, your midfield and your half-forwards, because they all play a part in defensive sets and attacking sets. And that is there. If them lines are perfectly structured and you turn the ball over, and a lot of Carlton's counter-attack goals people complain about are from dumb as shit calls. Handballs inside into traffic and it gets turned over. And because it is a team attack, a team offence, as well as a team defence. But that is it. And I want you to all really take notice of this next week, because it'll be really poignant, because the way that Collingwood play is a very short, sharp style as well. So you'll see this really obvious, as you did with Sydney. So I hope that answers your questions, guys and girls. It's not something to worry about. It's something that will be refined. And Carlton are never going to be a heavily accurate side. But it's a big thing that Carlton start to have more possessions under 30. And particularly in the third quarter, that 12 goals had been kicked from a distance of less than 30 minutes. 2 had been from Sydney throughout the game up till the third. And Carlton are basically forcing you to go long. Carlton have got the advantage that they've got players in and around very short to do this. So it's something that's really to take a notice of. And it's not something that's structural at all. It's just something that time will buy you. A great question from Come On You Spurs, Coys Blap. What do you think has made the biggest difference this year? Having 6 or 7 players that can hit targets going inside 50, unlike a few years back when it was just Murphy, I'll step up in the clearance tournaments. I think this is a good one, but I want to go a bit deeper in this. I do think you're onto something there, but I think that's a product of something. So I think, firstly, what Voss and co have done, particularly Tim Clark, he doesn't get enough credit, Tim Clark, because he is our midfield guy, is we're stopping the source, but we're controlling the source. Now, incidentally, around your midfield line, pretty much controls 90% of all them little categories of scores. So scores from turnover, scores from centre clearance, stoppages, rebound 50s, all that malarkey, scores from turnover, transition. Genuinely, the midfield is involved in 95% of that, I would say. So if you can control that, you can control the source of the opposition's, but you can also control the source of your own, which is important. But I want to alert you to this, and this is really important, right? So it's a lot of the incidentals. Now, if you remember in 2020, Teague was very bullish in 2021 about tackles and tackle pressure, and it was something that they were doing it. Now, I want you to alert you to the top line. That's Teague's Carlton. So 49.3 inside 1%ers, 8.1 tackles inside 50, 53 tackles, 68.8 intercept marks, and that's intercept possessions, and that's very important that Carlton had 2 of the leading intercept possession players in the competition in Jones and Whittaker. Now, this is the possession percentage. Carlton averaged 49% possession. right? So getting anything above 50 is almost impossible in the AFL, just the makeup of how it's played. Kick to handball ratio, as you can see, we're a very kick-heavy side, which I said at the time is archaic. Modern day football, I would predict around about 2030, you're almost going to get 1.1s. You're almost getting that now, 1.2s, 1.3s. Because if you can retain possession, it's a lot easier to handball, and that's a lot more accurate than kicking. It's very important. The metres gained, obviously, this is total, 1.26771, and an average of 16.5 metres per disposal. Now, Carlton's Voss's Carlton. Now, obviously, what we've done is we've brought this down. 50.4 1%ers. That is more, right? Now, I want you to alert while we're going through these numbers. Carlton have the ball 4% more. That is a lot. That is a real lot. 11.4 tackles inside 50. That's an increase. 52.8 tackles, which, again, we're going to cover the bottom graph, but I just want you to look at the bottom graph because that is where you'd be expected playing the same game plan with the addition percentage. Carlton still well over. This is an interesting one. You would expect intercepts to go down with possession. Carlton 68.5. Almost the same, but playing a lot more offensive brand. Right? Possession 53%. 1.4 kick to handball ratio. It's come down. Right? Your meters gained is roughly ahead per game. A lot ahead. And it's 15.1 meters per touch. And that is very important because that's controllable. The odds on a kick 15 plus of being hitting a target astronomically plummets. And if you look here at the bottom, is that's your expected with Teague's Carlton, more possession. Carlton killing the numbers. Killing the numbers. Obviously, we can't do a possessional base and we can't do a kick to handball ratio because you can't. And obviously, disposals, you can't do it because you haven't got the disposals. But roughly, that's what you'd expect. So what it is really is identifying something Carlton are poor at and then manipulating that game plan around it. And it is logical because if you look at Carlton's list with Teague, the strength was around contested players, as shown this year. A lot's been made of George Hewitt, but you've got to remember Ed Kerno 2 years ago was a very, very accomplished player doing what George Hewitt was. All you'd have to do is change and make him kick less and handball more, which is incidental. If you look at George Hewitt's numbers, you'll see the answer there. So it was a very, very game plan-based, structured system that Teague played that was really showing you it was absolutely poor. Voss has got his aces, he's created roles, and we're having some success from it. So I hope that answers your question, but that is something that I think is a real under-talked about category, that Voss has basically simplified it to his strengths. The gorgeous Amy Rhodes asks, not a question, but noting your Charlie Curnow chant song to the tune of Can't Take My Eyes Off You. From Ellie the Sears, who was getting a good run here last night. We need an end-of-season album. You know what? If we get 50 likes, fuck it, I'll do a Christmas album. But thank you very much. I tell you what, we got a lot of songs. Thank you very much. It's great question, great comment. Cheers me up. Big Benny Mcdonald. This is the best one of the year. 5-day break coming off a bye. Add that the Crips was down and we still had a Carlton blitz in the second. I love it. Also enjoyed Plowman's game, playing with a bit of confidence. Plowman is really, really important in the terms of that evidence for roles. And that's a very important thing. For me, Plowman is the consummate role player. And I said it was always going to be interesting to see when Carlton aren't shit, how he'll develop. And because his role is really defined, he's playing in a real nice little box of requirements. It's really obvious. 100% the best win. 100% the best win because no one gave us a hope. A lot of our fan base didn't give us a hope. So for me, spot on Ben. Best win by a long way. We've now got a long break before Collingwood, which really helps the boys out. And when you add in as well, it's come out that there was a lot of sickness and stuff. It just shows you how important structure and game plan is in today's game. It is everything. Game plan and structure always beats personnel. And when you look previously, we've won games from good personnel. Now we're winning games because of good structure, good application, and everyone understanding what we are trying to achieve. Good question, Ben. Cheers, mate. The legend that is Carmelo Zara. Good day to you, mate. How are you? Should we bring Kent back for a second tall forward until Mackay comes back? I don't think it does, and I'll tell you for why. I think if you look at the pressure numbers from our small forwards, you look at how they're adapting to the game, I don't think there is a need. I think that this is a really, really good crash course from them because now we've got 3, probably 4 players fighting for two roles when Harry comes back. And I think that's a really important thing because people were complaining about their goal kicking, not really seeing what they're doing because Voss is so heavy about being in front of the ball and really being there, being in front of the ball and create, because it allows you to be there for pressure, but also allows you to be there for when the ball doesn't get marked. And that's what Carlton's forwards are really doing. And Charlie is a great exponent of this, of bringing the ball in front of him with the goal behind him into the advantage of oncoming traffic. And that's a really big thing. I want you to know these two O words we talk about a lot, oncoming traffic and overlap. So I don't think there's a need. I really don't. I think it allows Carlton to play a fast brand. And I think this is a reason that you're starting to see transition scores skyrocket because they are playing smaller. So they're really having to do that. So it's born out of necessity to fast track their learning. And I think when Harry comes back, it's going to be very interesting because these small forwards now really are in a bit of form and really starting to develop. So I like Kemp. I love Kemp. And I see your argument. But I think that the makeup of the side, when you look at opposition sides, it's totally fine. Leg Dog, my mate, how you doing? Finally asked a question on the show. We've been mates for ages and he finally fucking puts his hand in his pocket. Cherra, just the 13 touches on the weekend, but very impactful. What do we need from him each week and how does it help us get us in the W? I think what it does is a combination. I call them the Fab Five at the moment, and that's Hewitt, Cherra, Cripps, Walsh and Bam, right? Impossible to stop, and all five of them have wonderful facets to their game that allow you to destroy opposition. So I want you to think of it as you've either got, like, I want to look at it this way. Some of them are your excitement X Factor players, and some of them can just bore you to death with brutality. And I think what that does is you don't have to have a 30-touch game anymore. I think what the midfield coaches do is they're looking at a class. They're looking at a line, and I reckon their KPIs are between all five of them. Do you know what I mean? So like the Beatles, it's a combination. Individually, they weren't quite as good, but together, if you combine their collective work, it's very good. George Harrison's a genius, do you know what I mean? And the Beatles on his own, he's just the weird guy, isn't he? You know what I mean? John Lennon, in the Beatles, he's a superstar. On his own, he was in a bed for 2 weeks, wasn't he? You know what I mean? Better fun. So, for me, I think what Cherra does, and that's a great point, his 13 touches were very useful as well. They were in key moments of the game, linking up, he looks to link up. But Cripps, he was slightly down on his usual impact, but Walsh came to the fore, Hewitt came to the fore, Bam Bam, so much important marks. And then the wings came into it as well. Cottrell. So I think what you're finding is, look at Richmond when they were at their pomp. When I look at Hawthorn, it was impossible to stop them because you stopped Hodge, Mitchell killed you. You stopped Mitchell, Jordan Lewis would kill you. Do you know what I mean? Gibson would kill you. There was all these superstars that could potentially hurt you. Then in the forward line, Rioli could hurt you. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. So that is what Carlton have done really well, is they've created an avenue that if you tag one and the other, you can't actually possibly do it. And with this massive rotation in game we're seeing with Cherra going to the wing, Cripps going forward, Walsh going to the wing off half back or half forward. All these rotations, Hewitt went to half back for stages in that third as well. Makes it so hard. Makes it so hard to create matchups. Because if you can rotate the matchups, and that's what Melbourne did incredibly well last year, rotating matchups in game. So did the Doggies as well. It got them to a final. And you're seeing where they are now. It's a huge thing. So I think it's very important, very understated part of Carlton's game, that we look way too much about touches, but not what they do and what they bring to the system. Give my boy, old Cottrell, some love. Anne-Marie, the lovely Anne-Marie, good day to you. Cottrell just wow. And with Charlie, do you think he'll get back to leaping that mark like TDK is doing now? I think he will do when Harry's there. I think at the moment with him not being there, I think obviously what he wants to do is stay a bit more central so he can control the fall of the ball. Cottrell was brilliant though, and he's been fantastic the last couple of weeks. Got his run this week. It's great to see VFL Cottrell, and that's what I said a couple of weeks ago. I want to see VFL Cottrell, and he's very direct. He's no nonsense, and particularly in that third, he was no nonsense. His running patterns for very little endeavour. He's a very selfless footballer, and I really enjoy it. Matt Gandalfo, good day to you, mate. I must admit, Cottrell surprised me. Vossi sees something in him. Maybe he is our goose, our wingman. He could be, mate. He could be. I like him, and I think he offers something. I think it's between him and Nunes, and it's what do you go with. But I personally prefer Cottrell. You know I'm a big fan of Nunes. If Cottrell can keep this up, his direct and his leading patterns, I think, are so important for how hard he works off the ball. And it is such a mantra of Vossi's system that you've got to work hard ahead of the ball. Go back to earlier one of the comments we talked about how the lines are so integral. Cottrell fits that. Elite engine, he doesn't get any slower, and he works and he works and he works and he tries and he tries and he tries. And I think that's important. And it's overlap run he causes. He really works hard for his half forwards who drop back. Motlop and Durden this week when they went on half forward. Fisher as well, another one who doesn't get enough kudos probably. He really works hard, and that is very integral to it. So it's something that I want to see Cottrell really continue to do, and something that we develop in some other players as well. Motlop does it. I'd like to see Carroll do it a little bit more. Feel like he gets lost sometimes because he doesn't quite have the confidence to overlap. Not as quick, but a very skillful user and a very important interim. And you've only got to look at someone like Ed Langdon, who handballs an awful lot for a wingman, for something that maybe Carroll wants to look at adding to his game, because he becomes the conduit and it allows someone like Sard to overlap on that wing. The way Carlton play at the moment, Cottrell plays just in front of Doc, which he's playing, and Newman, he's playing against probably less overlapping type players, but great that he's getting some love because he deserves it. David Cutting, why? Crips in the ruck. Well, it's kind of born out of necessity, isn't it? I'm not a big fan of it, and you know what? Controversially, I actually think Jesus and Lewis Young are way better in the rung. I feel like Cripps kind of gets lost there. I understand it though, and I understand it from two facets. One, you found Luke Parker particularly got lost in that. Him and Kennedy got lost in that when Cripper was there. And they started to become very static and knew what Cripper was going to do. He was going to be a body, would get the ball to fall like Jesus does. And they became, and it allowed space in and around him. And there was a lot of nice passages where Walsh and Hewitt combined because they were so focused on the threat Cripper is. And it's a wonderful thing about Cripps. Wherever he is, he draws players. He's like a magnet. But I'm not a big fan of it because obviously you don't take a Rolls Royce to move your auntie and uncle into a new place, do you? You take the Ford territory. So for me, I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand it's born out of necessity, but it does have its weird benefits, particularly in the forward 50 stoppages. It has its weird benefits because it creates space for others. So I don't mind it. Do I like it? Not really, but it's kind of born out of necessity. It won't be around forever. Adam Ross trying to get me into trouble. Question for you, Pom. It's almost crazy to ask after Charlie's long stink away from the game, but he's winning the Coleman in the interim. Who is better forward out of the two? It's a tough one because it's like saying who's your favourite kid, isn't it? I mean, it's almost impossible. You have one though. You have one, but you just don't admit it. So let's have a look at them. So it's interesting because both of them at the moment have kind of got a fair assessment in the terms of how they've played with forwards. I would argue that Harry had it a lot harder, a lot easier last year because he had a target. He had Levi Casbolt for a lot of times. Pinner and TDK, they rolled in that tandem. Harry is on the left in this slide. Colonel's on the right. And it's interesting that Colonel's numbers have actually gone through the roof, particularly in his attacking phases, since Harry has been out of the side because he's really, really started to be a bit more stay at home and run from deep. And I think by accident, Carlton have probably found something there because I actually think that Harry, in my opinion, works better at centre-half forward and Kerner out the goal square and running back. But that's for another question. You can see here that he does like to float up the ground. And I think this is really good because this week he did it. He floated from full forward. If you actually see his starting position, he was full forward. And that float causes chaos with the zones. And why it causes chaos with the zones is effectively the opposition's fullback is crossing into the zone of the centre-half back. And Kerno is a genius at doing this because the amount of marks that go behind him from a dummy run is insane. And I was watching that and thinking that if Harry starts to work in the pockets and run into the pockets, you are now separating all 6 zones in the forward line with 2 players. And that's what the great duos do in this game. A good example is Jack Darling and Kennedy when they're at their pomp when they got to the final. That is what they do. Kennedy running from full forward, Darling darting into the pockets It's almost impossible when they were. And it was always, every week almost, they'd kick 2 or 3 each. Do you know what I mean? Between them. So, very interesting. To answer your question, in my opinion, and you look at the key ones that you know, the marks and the marks inside 50, there's not much separating them. Do you know what I mean? In the terms that Charlie has got a lot harder job at the moment, and his game has adapted wonderfully to only having smalls by he's not actively going for the marks. He's looking to spoil and bring it to ground and take as many people with him. And on average, over the last 2 weeks, he's had 3 defenders on him, which is very important. In my opinion, I think Charlie Curnow is the better forward. I think if you said I could only keep one, I keep Charlie Curnow. I think he is better in every way, and I think he's dynamic. But thankfully, I don't have to make that choice, and I'm just honoured to have them together, because I think 2 of them together, impossible to stop. Man City Ultimate, well done on the league tackle. He'll be happy, won't he? Hey, the league title is in the Citizens' arms. What do you think it takes for Dow to come in? Who replaces him? Who plays Martin in the coming weeks? Well, for me, Dow, he ain't playing. And I'm going to be harsh here. You can't actually make a logical argument for him, because he's going at the low, mid-40s disposal efficiency. Yeah, he's having a lot of ball, but everyone does. Nick Graham looked like Gary Ablett Jr. at his prime. No offence to Nick Graham, but he did. Sam Kerridge looked all right in VFL. Second half, he's averaging way under 10 disposals as well. Look at how Carlton play, and look, because they get leads, gets tougher. Now, who are you taking out? And this is the question for everyone. How do you structurally have Dow in the team? Because you ain't taking the Fab 5 out. And if one of the Fab 5 is injured, why would you have Dow, who can only play inside mid? And the proof is, if you actually look at the VFL and look when he has rested, he's anonymous. And he rests quite often in the second half. Anonymous. And they try and get him in the game. But his ball use doesn't allow for it. He's always been a poor ball user, because he's an impact player. And the way Carlton play now is they don't play a counter-attack brand. Like a Geelong who looked for that injection. You've seen Dangerfield's been negated since coming from Adelaide, because genuinely they control possession. So what he's doing is actively working against that by looking to be quick and boom it in. So for me, he needs 3 or 4 injuries. And there is no way to warrant it. And I love Dow. I'm one of his biggest fans. But there's no way you can warrant it, because if you're honest and you actually look at it, Setterfield makes more sense because he can play 3 positions. You look at it, even Williamson, probably to an avenue, can play on the wing or play on halfback, and then you move someone else forward. It makes no sense, because you're ruining the rotations of a midfield. And Voss has got his game plan. In the centre bounces, it's the same players all the time, because he trusts that is where you win. You're most vulnerable after scoring a goal, so are the opposition. So you want your aces and your places. For me, I don't think it's football reasons people want Dow in. I think it's some kind of weird loyalty to the system. And I'm telling you now, he won't be there next year. And as much as I love Dow, he has simply nowhere near done enough in VFL. Ignore the disposals and look at it. Look at it sensibly, please. Just look at it sensibly. Because you can't actually structurally put him in. You can't. Without sacrificing somewhere else. And people say, well, move a winger. Why? That has improved. Our transition is up 22% in the last 4 weeks. Why ruin that? For the sake of saying you've got Dow in the team. Mental. So, unfortunately for me, he looks like a player that needs a change of scenery. I'm going to predict that it's going to be another SPS, though, when he changes his scenery. And we'll have people doing these horrible posts. God, I told you Dow was rubbish. I mean, like, okay, cool, brilliant. I mean, I think he's a good player, but I think it's too far gone. And I can't see anyone in today's game now utilising him unless they're willing to really take a risk. So Richmond might be a team that does it because he could suit their system. But genuinely, I don't. As for Martin, Motlop's nailed that position for me. And I think Martin, honestly, is going to find it hard to get back in the side. Sudi de Winter, g'day mate, how are you doing? If Jack Martin is healthy, who goes out? I think this is a tough one. I think at the moment, Cottrell and Carroll would be the 2 that probably look over their shoulder. And I'll tell you for why. Motlop has played really high, almost on the wing. Durden can also do that. So for Martin to come in, you can probably sacrifice one of them players because they are flank wing type players. For me, I wouldn't bring him in though, as I've just said in the previous question, purely because I don't think he's earned it. I don't think he offers enough. I think what he does is horrendously overrated. Horrendously overrated, I think, sometimes. Where I think Motlop brings a lot more, and so does Carroll in his potential. Maybe Carroll does deserve a rest. Maybe Cottrell, you could argue, maybe he's going to have some patches. But for me, why change something that's working? Because at the moment, the system hides these poor games. But Jack Martin definitely will be coming back when he is fit. But for me, you are now in the luxury of these positions are very strong. You can make sure he's 100% fully fit. Mike Moldridge, good day to you, mate. You have a golf background. Our next 3 games I've tagged with our crew are Blues, Amen Corner. So that's Augusta for those who don't know. Pies, Bombers, Tigers. On the our 11th and 12th, 13th games. Well done, yeah. Awesome. It all fits. Feels a significant stretch. Well, as you know, Amen Corner is probably the most scenic, and it's kind of like, these are tough holes. These are question mark holes, they call it, because they're very tough holes. And if you can play them 1 or 2 under par, genuinely, if you do that for 4 rounds, you're going to be there or thereabouts to win the green jacket. So I'd agree. If Carlton win 2 of these 3, which I definitely expect 2 or 3 to do, and sneak the Tigers, because I think the Tigers are going to be hungry, and it'll depend on how they're playing. I'll reserve judgment till I've seen us play the Bombers, and that week for them how Tigers go. I love that analogy, and I think it's spot on. The Blue Airman Corner. Not really questions, just comments, but I like these 2, so I thought I'd throw them in. Casey Caldwell, love the lessons, like stepping up in big moments. Huge tick for the coaching staff. Spot on. Spot on. And it's like we said earlier, rolls. So important to the system, and it's allowing these players. And Damien, no questions, just praise. We got the Sydney double. You would have been content with 1-1. I think everyone would have been based on Twitter. Now on to the filth. 10-2 should be our aim. Spot on, mate. And times are high, and enjoy this. Honestly, my message to everyone is stop your weird agendas with who should play. Just fucking embrace it. The coaching staff have shown they know what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And that's partly proved by my role now. I'm not telling you what they need to do. I'm showing you what they're doing so we can get an understanding of it, because they are nailing it. They're nailing it weekly. And yeah, just enjoy it, man. Enjoy it. Love you 2 guys as well. Cheers for the question. Michael, with 2-3 picks in the mid-season draft, what type of players would you choose? Love your work. Thank you, mate. Love your comment, mate. Dr. Blue, TARDIS. Well, to use it, these guys are wanting spoilers. So, a bit of a Doctor Who reference. Further to Michael's question, have you identified any players that suit us? I'll give you a spoiler. It's coming soon on Blue Abroad. It'll probably be next week, but there is some guys. But I want you guys to have a look at a guy called Max Ramsden at Sandy Dragons. Very impressive. Statistically in the MSD, Ruckman are your guarantees. So 5 of them have made the grade since the formation of the mid-season draft. So check Ramsden out. Very excited about him, and I think he is as close to good to go within 6 months as anyone in the list. We have 10 games under our belt to see where positional reserves are weakest. I think we need another key position backman, swingman, potentially a backup ruckman. Also to give Murkoff someone to rotate with. Who do you think we should target? So yeah, I'm not going to give my names because I've got a list of 5, which I will almost guarantee 2 of them will be picked up, I think. I think it's no-brainers. But I agree with you. I think that they're probably looking for someone who's a forward who can pinch it, or a backman who can pinch it. I think that'd be one. And I would say that Carlton will look for the other statistic is a smaller player who's ready to go. So I would almost guarantee Will Hayes finds a way onto the list. So, but personally, I would be looking at that. Just taller body, that can give us a bit. I'm not so much bothered about the ruck VFL situation because I think Carlton would be criminal to take someone for 6 months purely on the AFL list because at the moment the options available to you are 6, 12 and 18. So I think it would be mental to pick up a ruckman purely just to play in the VFL. I think if you're picking up a 6 months option, it's to cover 2 horses. So whether that's a backman who can play in the ruck or a forward that can play in a ruck. But I would say the necessity would be a swingman. So that might be a clue to who I'm going to suggest. Cheers for your questions, boys. Brendan, who's out, who's in? Don't think anyone gets dropped, says some bombastic. Good day to you, mate. Always a pleasure to read your comments. Or HSB, or needs a refresher. What do you think? I'm with you. I don't think there will be many changes. Depends, with the health and safety protocols, as you allude to. That's just a lottery, isn't it? I think maybe you might see, dependent on what goes on. Nunes was out. He might look at Cottrell and Carroll out, even though I thought he was good. He might get a spell. He has been rumoured to be sore the last 2 weeks. And Noon's come in, which just offers that reliability, which is pretty much what Carroll has been playing. He's been moved from pillar to post. And I would say Noon's is better. Why you saw a very good start from Carroll is it was a defined role. At the moment, he's pinch hitting and allowing the rotations, which I don't think suits him. But that would probably be the only change I would suspect if I was a betting man. I think you don't really need to change a winning system. The centre bounce, good mate of mine. Good day to you. Love the work you do. Happy for you boys and fans. Good to see things finally working out. And stop the bleeding and take wins is undeniable. Thanks, mate. Much love to you. I appreciate it, buddy. And wishing North all the best, mate. I know you're a big North fan, so thank you very much. Go and check him out if you're a fantasy coach nerd. Christian, good day to you. Always a good question and a bit of a thinker. I love Christian. Hey, Pom, did the Blues do better out of not landing the Papley deal? I think definitely. I think the trade value would have mean we'd been stuck with him. And to be honest, at the time we were excited, I was excited because we were in the doldrums, weren't we? But I think now you look at Motlop, you look at Durden, and Durden's no surprise. We talked about him heavily when no one else did in the draft previews on Blue Abroad. He was one of my guys that I picked out. There was the James Rowe conversation, I think, and I think obviously Durden is miles ahead of James Rowe. No surprise there. Yeah, massively. 100% dub. 100% dub. I think Papley, for me, he's very good, but I think what we've built with them picks, moving forward as well, it's allowed us to pick up Chera and players like that, I think, because we would have had a future involved in there with that contract. I think it's all gravy, mate. All gravy, baby. Fuck him. Fuck Papley. Ian, good day to you, my friend. How are you? Just got censored by Facebook for using the word Pom. Absolutely bizarre. I will ask you all, if you are going to tag me and stuff, use Pommy. I know that we're Australian and Poms have got the same affliction. We like to shorten names. For some reason, it's coming up under racial motivated. I don't get it. I mean, honestly, if Facebook are watching YouTube, it doesn't offend me. I don't know many English people, Scottish people, Irish people, anyone from the British Isles that would be offended by it. We're kind of thick-skinned and, do you know what I mean? We take it as a term of endearment. So, don't get it. It's weird, though, because if you say Pommy C-U-N-T, you don't get censored. So, maybe Facebook hates Poms, but sorry about that, Ian, mate. Always a pleasure to hear from you, though, mate. Is the Mosquito Fleet the best option structurally in this side? I just don't know how we bring Pitto and McKay back in with TDK. Well, I think TDK, and I said it on Blue Abroad, it was a bold call. I actually think how TDK has developed so well that you will start to see that rotation with JSOS seems to work. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Harry come in and Pitt maybe not and only be used kind of like the dual ruckman are used at the doggies for certain games. I think you're spot on. I think and it's always been there though. Let's remember, it's just the goals are coming from them now, but they're always there. And I think small forwards are patchy anyway. Small forwards are patchy. They kick goals in spurts, but I do think you'll see them go slightly less tall. And I think the need when Mackay is there, because he did play him in the ruck a bit, I think suddenly it changes the avenue, particularly how well Kerner was worked solo forward as well, gives you that option. So I think you're spot on AFL hot takes as always, mate. Always good thing. I think the Mosquito Fleet is starting to bear fruit, and I think now what it does the most is give you options. Give you options. Rafi, my boy, how are we doing? Might be a bit early, as it's not even the bye yet, but I feel the best thing was the SPS deal. Yes, spot on. SPS for Lewis Young. Massive overs in Carlton's favour. Massive overs. Like, ridiculous overs. Like, it's not even close how overs that is. Like, look at it. Spot on, mate. Said it at the time, you'd be lucky to get a 4th or a 5th. I didn't really rate him. I liked SPS, but sometimes you've got to put away your like for facts. I would have paid a 4th or a 5th max for SPS. And Lewis Young surfaced a reply to the doggies. Always thought he had a bit about him, particularly in that final series. So, mate, absolute nail. And then you've got to look at Dow this year. He will be on the trade block. See what we can turn him into. If it's a Lachlan Scholl or someone like that, straight deal with that pick, could be a huge dub. Stephen, a man after my own heart, my old friend. Anyone's sick of hearing we haven't beaten anyone top of the 8. But when you're third, potentially there's only 2 teams you can beat, isn't there? And we've beaten one of them, right? And spot on. Doggies, Powers, Tigers, Sydney. All these sides were in the 8 at the start of the year when this fixture was made, and suddenly we've made it look easy. It's a ridiculous comment. It's a ridiculous comment. Like, is anyone saying that about Melbourne? You know what I mean? Like, Brisbane's loss this week is a lot more catastrophic than anyone else's because they've lost to a side that was many people's thought was a smoky for the spoon. So, bizarro world. But you're always going to get the haters, and people want to. And I think sometimes it's easy to do. Do you know what I mean? You've got to remember, I was on Blue Abroad and this show when Carlton was shit. Being negative is really easy when negativity is there. But it's easy content. It's easy content moaning. Honestly, it's fucking easy. Take it from a Pom. We like a moan. It's really easy. So I just think it's the easy way out. It's a cop-out. It's a lot harder to think objectively than it is just being mental. Do you know what I mean? So it's a lot easier to stand on a hill and see that you can see the Melbourne skyline and go, oh, where's the curve? The earth must be flat. But in reality, if you look at it objectively, you can actually see the earth is a sphere quite easy, can't you? You can see that the globe exists. Do you know what I mean? But you've got to be objective. You just can't just, go with the heart. So I'm sick of it as well. Jeff O'Day, good friend of the channel. Good day to you, Jeff. Where would we be now if we hired Vossen the first time he applied? Full disclosure, I was on the Teague train, but hey, no one should listen to what I say. Anything I say, Jeff, that's not true, mate. You always give a good obstructive comment, so it's good. Kept me on my toes a few times, and that's good. You need to challenge people. Wow, how good is it? The hands down to the new coaching team, new look Carlton, just the way the lads are going about it. I'm in love with it. Go Blue Boys. Just fantastic. Really, 8 and 2 from 10. Wow. Keep up the good work, lads. Amazing footy around the park. Mids, wow. Forward line without Harry just been amazing. Mate, spot on. And enjoy it, mate. For him, enjoy it, my friend. Enjoy the fucker. We've had some horrible things. But to answer Jeff's question, I think it's hard to say because I think that the years he was at Port, he's in that interim while Teague was there, was a real formative year, wasn't it? That 2020 year particularly, they kind of came from nowhere. There was always kind of the press about Carlton, if you remember. Oh, they'll fall. Even I bought into that, they'll slip up eventually. I didn't rate them. And then in 2021, do you know what I mean? They backed it up, didn't they? Against my better judgment. I thought it was going to be hard for them to shift from that short quarters. And no surprise, he's gone. So I think you look at what roles he did there. He was part of the leadership development, particularly in the midfield, very hands-on. I think maybe it might have not have gone well. I'd love to say that them 2-3 years he had in that interim there, particularly at the Bolton times as well. I think all them 5 years, imagine what he's learned. I think we're bearing the fruits of that. But also shout out to Timmy, Clark and Hansen as well. They're massive adjustments as well. But boys, enjoy it, man. Enjoy it because it's great. Teague Strain, good day to mate. How do I explain to my wife I need to cancel September bookings, Pom? Well, if she's got a best friend or a sister, you know what I'd do, right? I would, in the August time, build up that, she doesn't spend as much time with her sister or that like that. And then just, be the chivalrous knight in armour. Handball her to her sister, say, look, I booked you a girls' weekend to Bali or a girls' week. Or just be honest. Do you know what I mean? That's my approach with my wife. You know what I mean? September, I am off duty. I have no kids. I have no responsibilities for the Blue Boys. But good luck with it, mate. I would say the honest approach. But if you want to be a little bit devious, maybe play onto the girls' week in Bali. Do you know what I mean? I do that. Or just have a big blowout with your in-laws. That always works. Because I get uninvited to stuff if I do that. Ben Tripp, Lewis Young and Whittaker have been pillars. What were the one-out stats looking like? Well, I mean, it's 72% win ratio for Whittaker, which is in the elite category, and it's 62 from Young, which is in the okay category. I think the difference is the roles they play. If you watch, actually, genuinely Young this year has really gone up the ground a bit, particularly against Tex Walker, you saw it. It works in tandem. I think the big thing at the moment as well is that they're looking to spoil and bring it to ground, particularly Young, which is really important. So I agree with you. I think they complement each other well. And I think the difference between him and Jones, and I think why Young is a huge upgrade on Jones, is he doesn't get lost. He doesn't go attacking the ball. What he does is he really sticks to his role well. And I think it's no surprise why they're such a very good combination, because both are decent kicks, both understand their roles, and both really service their smalls really well. And it's interesting Go back and watch the footage. Young has Sard genuinely at his feet, where Whittaker has Doc, which is a real interesting thing because it really does play into each other's hands. So I really enjoy it, and I think it is a real strong thing. And you're actually seeing that Young now in the last couple of weeks has really been a bit more of the stay at home and freeing Whittaker up to get them intercepts. So they've had a flip of position. So their one-on-ones are quite what, but they are still fairly high for the AFL. And like you say, I think they're combining really well. It's really replicating that Harrison Petty and Stephen May combo at Melbourne, which works so well. So very exciting. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions. Like I say, go and check out Quacking Cauldron. Thank you for sponsoring this segment. It is run by the beautiful Mrs. Pom, so go and check her out and say hello. She's like me, fun to chat to. Till next time, I'll see you midweek with a VFL wrap, and then we've got pies. Have a great week. I love you all. Pom out.